here again? Let's review. Climate change is a very real threat to both our environment, economy, futures, and way of life. Urgent action is needed to reverse or at least slow the rising temperatures and sea levels. Since the Trump administration decided to back out of the Paris climate change agreements, experts have begun to predict cascades of harmful effects, ranging anywhere from violent conflicts over resources to the European car market struggling to the extinction of the polar bears. A rapidly destabilizing climate affects the environment, which in turn affects natural resources available to people, natural disasters, and overall farming climate. Let's start with natural disasters. According to the Union of Concerned Scientists, while hurricanes are a natural part of our climate system, recent research suggests that there has been an increase in intense hurricane activity in the North Atlantic since the 1970s. In the future, there may not necessarily be more hurricanes, but there will likely be more intense hurricanes that carry higher wind speeds and more precipitation as a result of global warming. Hurricanes are just the start of it. Heat waves, glacier meltings, rising seas to flooding, and increased CO2 production all contribute to the growing crisis. The oceans in particular are in danger of global warming and pose a danger to humans. Aside from the obvious flooding, which is hazardous to human habitations near water sources, CO2 emissions seep into the sea and bond with carbonate in shellfish shells, causing their shells to become more brittle and lowering their survival rate. This runs right up the food chain, from big fish to bigger fish to biggest fish, all the way up to humans. This is best summarized in a video by the Alliance for Climate Education.
Okay, you've got bigger problems than easy-to-crack clams? Maybe not if you're among the 1 in 7 people who get most of their protein from seafood. Or if you understand how unstable the world would be with 1 billion more hungry people.
1 in 7 people derive their source of food from the ocean, and this could mean serious trouble since 1/7 of 7 billion is still 1 billion. This can affect migration, as hunger, lack of income, and poverty, along with violence, are combined to account for 3 in 4 migrant children from Guatemala. If that statistic is anything to go off of, depriving families elsewhere of their primary income and food source may cause a mass exodus migration in search of jobs or food, or even worse, famine and death. Now it's time to talk about how this relates to the political scene. Obviously, with all of the previously listed ramifications of climate change, people are eager to avoid it. At the 2015 Paris Climate Change Conference, 175 of the recognized 193 countries agreed to sign the Paris Climate Agreement. According to Britannica, the meeting was part of a process dating back to 1992 when countries initially joined the international treaty called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Seeing the need to strengthen emission reductions, in 1997, countries adopted the Kyoto Protocol. That protocol legally bound developed countries to emission reduction targets. The U.S. now accounts for nearly 28% of all global carbon emissions, despite accounting for only 5% of the global population. Pulling out of the Paris Agreement could be devastating and set the burden of reducing carbon emissions on other countries or on private companies. In the United States, Trump has turned climate skepticism into U.S. policy. Now that skepticism appears to be setting the tone for other world leaders to deny climate science or resist taking action to cut carbon emissions. This ties into the economic impact of the U.S. pulling out of the climate accords. If U.S. car companies are no longer restricted by carbon emission reducing policies, they may choose to halt research, which is costly, and continue as they are, while brands in Europe are forced to bear the burden of reducing their emissions to compensate for the Americans ignoring it. This will cause the European car brands to jack up prices in order to stay in the black. This doesn't only apply to cars. 4 of the world's staple foods like wheat, maize, rice, and soybeans all depend on a semi-constant climate to grow. Rapidly changing climate and unpredictably and unadaptably quick rises in temperature will harm these crops, among others. And by 2050, the global population is set to reach around 9.8 billion. Food will be scarcer, more expensive, or just plain unavailable, period. Stark increases in global temperature are concerning, to say the least. The potential for conflict over lack of resources is very concerning, and it's even more concerning that the President of America, as the leader of a first world country, is flat out denying the fact that climate change is an issue, setting bad examples for other nations. American culture has taught us to think as individuals, not as part of a group. This can backfire, as seen with the whole America First movement that Trump reignited, which helps people forget that they're actually part of a larger society with an obligation to take care of the planet that they live on, even if they don't think it will directly affect them immediately. American cultural tendencies to think selfishly, economically, and short-term are really shining through, since one of the reasons Trump refuses to back climate change is because of the perceived taxes it might impose. Leaders in other countries have expressed the same disappointment and dismay at the USA's decision to back out of the Paris Agreement, but until 2020, the year that the US is officially allowed to break off, and also the year we have a chance at getting a new president, it seems like the US and the world has a lot to work on.
One giant leap for mankind.